Hello and welcome to Hosting HR with me, Leon Morley, founder of HR Recruitment Solutions. Josh Bursin recently said that in 2022, everything was going to change for HR, and today we're going to be discussing HR Trends 2022. We've gathered this lovely panel with us and we'll shortly introduce those. But for now, I just want to say we're live across LinkedIn, Facebook and on YouTube. And we can make this interactive, so feel free to let us know what trends that you're seeing out there in the market, and also any questions you might like to get across to the panel, and I'll do my very best to make sure that we can put those over. So let's start with some introductions. So Tom, I'm going to start with you, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I'm Tom Haak from the HR Trend Institute. You want
Any
more?
more than that? Yeah, tell us more. A returnee to Hosting HR, right?
And I'm Dutch, which does not help, generally speaking. And I'm honored to be in the show again. So it's the second time, and I always like the conversation. So I'm looking forward to a nice session today.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. Yeah, you were a fantastic panelist last time, and the show we did obviously was around is it time to say goodbye to the HR business partner? If anybody wants to catch that show, it's on the YouTube channel. You can find it there, and it's also across all of the podcast platforms as well. So go check it out if you'd like to find out a bit more from Tom. Tom was also being a little bit, I think, nice there. Tom, I think you were voted like the second HR global thought leader or something,
Yeah.
one of these things. So, you know, your presence is felt far and wide. I was talking to people in the US today and they were talking about you. So it was quite interesting to see how far that goes. Yeah. So moving on, Perry, another returnee. Delighted to have you back, Perry. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, pleasure to be back. Like Tom, I guess we didn't do too badly to get asked to return. Yeah, so Perry Timms, founder and chief energy officer of People Transformational HR. Not as famous as Tom. I mean, like Tom's just known the world over. So I'm a legend in my own little universe. I just want to say hello to Maureen Sandbach, who said hi on the chat, because I know Maureen. So yeah, looking forward to today, Leon, because I do like to look forward. So trends, the future, where we're headed, all that. Really happy to be here.
Thank you, Perry. And yeah, so obviously you can check out Perry's previous show, which we did back in June, I think it was last year, to do with the future of HR. So yeah, feel free to go check that again on the YouTube channel. And also on the YouTube channel, Perry was also involved in our HR Book Club series. So if you'd like to know more about Perry's book, Transformational HR, then go to the YouTube page and you'll find a nice little interview with Perry and I discussing the book. So last but not least, George, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you, Leon. Yes, my name is George Powell. I am head of people at the CIPD. I have massive feelings of inferiority amongst the panel. Yeah, I haven't got any books. I haven't written any books. I'm a practitioner. I've been in HR for a long time. I do lots of HR stuff, and I'm absolutely delighted to be invited to talk about HR trends. And I think, you know, my perspective is very much from that practitioner basis. So I don't have reams of research to draw on. I just talk to a lot of people and read a lot of stuff.
And in fairness, whenever I've heard about you or people have talked about you, they've always said very glowing things as a bit of a visionary and things like that. So that's why I was so keen to get you on the panel today. So yeah, you should definitely not feel inferior. I probably should feel the most inferior on this panel. But yeah, so thank you all for your introductions.
It's time for Two Lies, One Truth.
That's right. So for those that have not watched a previous live, we do a little snippet called Two Lies, One Truth, where we tell 3 facts about ourselves, our panelists, not me, 3 facts about themselves, 2 of which are lies and 1 is a truth. And at the end of the show, stay tuned because the truths will be revealed. And we normally like to guess which one that might be. So we'll go in the same order because it makes sense to do that. So, Tom, what are your 3 facts?
Yeah, one is that I hate these type of games, but that is then the truth. Yeah, but no, I'll give you 3. One is
Okay.
I ran 16 marathons. Yeah, that's what
Okay.
number 1. Number 2 is I never drink alcohol, and
Okay.
number 3 is I have a major in archaeology.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I think yeah, I'm not going to guess now, obviously, but
Yeah.
I reckon I know. I'm just guessing a little bit.
Okay.
Perry, what are your 3 facts?
Okay. So I used to own the domain name 21st Century Fox back in 1999, but 20th Century Fox wouldn't buy it off me. Transformational HR is translated in Mandarin Chinese, Norwegian, and Romanian. And I'm featured on a viral TikTok video with my beard being tickled, and it's got over 1 million views.
I've seen that one. Yeah. Oh, so
Right. Okay. TikTok. Yeah, as we were talking earlier, very much the in demand and on point. I think social media right now. But yeah. Anyway, George, what are your 3 facts?
My word, follow that. So mine, I had to write them down because obviously I'd never tell lies, so I had to write them down. I was once a ball girl at Wimbledon. I once broke my ankle doing a parachute jump.
Okay.
I once abseiled down the side of my office building.
Oh. Okay. On your own or as part of a group activity? I won't. Don't answer. Don't answer. We'll do it
how
at the
many
end.
floors?
I'm not going to give that away.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for doing that. And as mentioned, we'll go through those at the end of the show, and we'll find out which of those 9 lies and which are the 3 truths from our 3 panel members. So let's talk a bit more about HR trends, shall we? So now, before we did the show, I asked each of the panelists to tell me what they felt were their key trends. And obviously for Tom, there's a whole article which I've shared in the chat, so you should be able to see that for his latest trends. But I wanted to try and really kind of iron out the key main ones and pick some of those out. And the one that I'd like to start with is actually from you, George. So you talked about HR rebrand or brand HR. I'm just wondering if you can let us know what you mean by that.
Yeah, and again, I said at the beginning, is this a trend? This is more my opinion about the HR profession. And I think HR has a brand issue. I think that what we end up doing as practitioners, or how we're perceived, I think lets us down in terms of what we can do to add value and how we demonstrate what we can do to make businesses better. I think that there's a lot of focus and there's a lot of practice which is focused on policies and rules and checking things and policing, and I think that it misses the point of what we can do, which is about getting that balance right between our people that we employ and getting the best success for the business. I think that there's this huge swell of anti-HR rhetoric in the press. I think that is based on, kind of this belief that HR are trying to push businesses in a certain direction, which is anti-business and anti-commercial. And I think that is not how we should try and position ourselves as practitioners and professionals. I think it's about how do we really demonstrate how we can get the best out of the people who work in organizations. And you don't do that by expecting people to all respond in the same way to things, or to follow a set of rules, or to expect that the same things are going to motivate people. You do that by understanding your people and talking to them and treating them like people. So I don't think this is about a load of navel gazing about what we should be called. Should it be HR? Should it be personnel? I mean, I think there was an argument some years ago about we should revert to personnel because that's about people, and you call it human resources, you're talking about resources. And I think all that is not helpful in terms of establishing us as a brand and how we can really reposition our the influence and the roles that we play in organizations to get the best out of people. I think that the way that you end up in these ER issues and the way you end up in these situations is by having this expectation that people are going to behave in a certain way, which is generally going to be unhelpful or difficult, and so you treat them expecting them to behave like that way. So you're legislating for poor performance rather than encouraging and implementing processes to create great performance, and you work in synergy with your organization to make sure that everyone is pulling in the same direction to achieve the best results. And the best results are you as an individual and your organization moving into that direction. I think that that's the issue that we face as a profession, that it's this perception of who we are and what we do. And I see it in my own organization, I see it in every organization, that, oh, HR in the room, oh, watch what you say, all this kind of, that commentary, I think just gets in the way. And I think HR people get in the way in, their own processes and procedures, and you must fill in this form and you've got to do, all this sort of stuff that just gets in the way of actually being able to work together to achieve the best outcome.
Makes a lot of sense. I think certainly I hear that as well. Obviously, talking to a lot of HR practitioners, a lot feel that the perception of them is not necessarily in line with how they see themselves, if that makes sense, and how they see the profession and what's changing and things like that. Perry, when we talked about the future of HR, it kind of links in a little bit to what you talked about there, because you talked about having a seat at the table and the position of HR being elevated, and as a sort of direct result of the pandemic and the situation where those organizations that have handled that well, and those HR departments and things. Do you see this sort of rebrand sort of HR? Do you see it happening at the moment?
I would never have said seat at the table because I hate that. But
Sorry.
what I would have said is, no, don't worry. But what I would have said is how people viewed us in adding value to the business changed significantly, and that doesn't change at all. I've often said, don't get a seat at the top table, go and sit in the canteen and find out what real people want. That's how I used to describe it. But anyway, so I wasn't pulling you up on that one. I got involved in a LinkedIn spat because somebody tried to blame the Great Resignation in totality on HR. I'm like, what? Really? So he wouldn't budge, but it just shows you sometimes how deeply ingrained the stuff that George has been talking about is towards HR, perhaps without any realization of some of the most significant shifts that I've seen in the profession over the last sort of 4 or 5 plus years. People like Tom will talk it into existence, and people go, actually, that's how I want to be, and that's what I will do. So I've seen more aspiration. I've seen the CIPD push the business savvy agenda, and I think that got people to start stepping into a little bit more about, actually, I don't really know enough about the products, the services, the market, the environment that we're operating in. So I often say that if an HR professional doesn't know that, they're just coasting along in a mediocre sense, and they'll never add the value they could do. But I see much more agitation, and I actually see quite the opposite. I see HR people knocking on the doors of leaders going, are you going to do this strategic workforce planning then? Because otherwise I'm just going to keep recruiting people on this treadmill, and that's never a way to be, because you're going to drain money, you're going to kill morale. So I see us being a bit more agitative, and I think that's a good thing, because I then see business response to that being, actually, I've got to tackle that, haven't I? It isn't just about P&L or supply chain. It actually is about what are we doing to look after people, and social mobility and inclusion. And I think some of what hits people with this is where voices, people have stood up and said, organization, what are you doing about me too? Because it matters to me, so I want to know what's going on there, and so on. There was a beautiful bot on Twitter yesterday that was calling out gender pay gap differentiation for every company promoting International Women's Day, and some of it was staggeringly big, and it's like, whoa, you are just playing a really false game. So I think HR's got this opportunity, I think, to step into those and go, this is damaging for us, this is dangerous for us, I've been telling you about this for ages, let's work on it together and let's make the difference that people need us to in order to sustain our performance and everything George has said. So it has shifted.
Okay. Tom, it kind of links into one of the things you talked about in your report this year about HR as activists, and just hearing this sort of rebrand HR. And one of the things that I think you called for was that HR should be doing more beyond its kind of immediate. So I wonder if you could talk me through this, what you mean by this HR as activists.
Yeah, and I think just reflecting on what has been said, I think there is not one HR. And so that's one of the other things I thought. It's not the HR. So I think we should look at different parts of HR, operations, strategy, people success. So that already helps, because part of the image comes by people expecting different things, and nobody gets what they want. So the people don't get the right attention, not the focus on that. Management does not get real good strategic advice, and operations are often poor. So that leads to, there's a lot of poor HR. So I can see that people don't like HR in many organizations. So that's one. The activist part is more reflected to what Perry was saying, for example, about there are things happening in organizations that should not happen. For example, salary differences between men and women. That's not new. That is already there for years and years and years, and and it's not changing rapidly. A little bit, but not very rapidly. So, but there are other things we can read about them every day, about harassment, about unions being kept out of organizations as Starbucks and Amazon. And then in the Netherlands, we have had a row of sexual harassment cases in big media companies in the last months. And then the question is, where is HR in those organizations? And in the reports you read, well, I never read anything about HR. They are kind of absent. And that leads to the question, HR should not just observe it and report it, and worse, try to cover it up. Often HR is involved in the cover. Oh, it's not so bad, and let's talk. No, HR should be activist in the organization. That's one. So the salary differences is a real obvious. The facts are there. Why is it not changing? Relatively easy to change, I would say. Some other things are not so easy to change, but it's not only in the organization. It's also outside the organization. What are we doing in our communities? What are we doing even in the global scene? And we see that today as well. Some companies are really standing up and saying, we take a position, but there are other companies that say, well, yeah, it's complicated. And I won't talk about football, but there are football clubs in the UK and also in the Netherlands, that are struggling. So I think HR can play a role, should play a role, but that does not necessarily lead to a better brand, I would say. So that's it doesn't solve the brand issue, because sometimes you have to be nasty as well, and often the brand. Often HR is too much focused on having a good brand position with the people in charge. That's where they would like to be seen as the business people, and there are other stakeholders as well.
But I don't disagree. I think that the whole and that is the nature of the role with HR. There's the good and the bad, and some of the bad stuff that HR professionals, practitioners have to do is really damaging to people. I think that where the people in those roles can make the difference is by operating in a way with as much integrity and fairness and focus on the person. I think it's when you lose that focus on the person, if you're completely blindly following, the examples you gave about, when there are sexual harassment cases and claims, when HR is then in a difficult position to, defend or to cover up or whatever.
Yeah.
This is about, how do those people have that autonomy and that ability to step outside? And it's a really, difficult challenge, because ultimately, the HR people are one part of the organization. And if you're the sole voice, how can you really, if you work in an organization that is very fixed in its approach, how much change can you affect? But I think, I do agree. I think there's a real responsibility. And if you want to be good at your job, then you need to step into those challenges. I would take slight disagreement with you about the, changing the gender pay gap. And I agree, absolutely more needs to be done, but I would not say it's a simple thing to change. I think
let's not
ingrained
discuss that. But often things are pictured as, it's difficult and it takes time, and also we first have to look at the education and we have to look at this. But there's a lot of excuses often not to do things. And,
but there's also a lot of barriers, and so it's simple in some ways and difficult. And so I think we have to be really realistic about, but I think the key to it is the transparency and the
open. But why is it not changing then? We know this for 20 years. It might be difficult.
Well, because a lot of it is because of who's responsible for caring. That's
also political issues. There's political. Where's the political pressure to say, well, we should equality?
Where is the political pressure? But currently, if you look at in the UK, maternity and paternity provisions, entirely different. There's that encouragement for the man to be earning the money and the woman to be taking the time off to care. That's what creates those big divisions. When you take a year out of your career, I took 3 years out of mine. It absolutely stalled my career.
But isn't there now shared? Isn't there now shared parental leave though? So you could, a man can take it.
But it still doesn't really encourage.
Yeah, I'm not defending. I'm just saying that there are steps that have happened probably, in that time that but obviously, it's nowhere
moving.
Near
It's very slow, very slow.
I think from my perspective, obviously I talk to lots of HR professionals every day, as I've done for the last sort of 11 years or so. I speak to a lot of HR professionals. We talk about sort of these activists and things, and I think many of them are, but there are some institutions and organisations that just aren't really that bothered, and I think they will eventually get found out, and I think that there's certainly some that you would say that, I see a HR person go in, and then sort of 6 months down the line, another HR person has gone into that role. And then, sometimes I might get a call and I'll be thinking, okay. And I'm thinking, people just keep going in and out. And you just think this is not an organization that's, that's particularly willing to listen to. But it kind of, it goes at odds a little bit. And this is where I think from a trend for 2022, obviously with, this elevated position that I think HR has now. Well, if that's what we all think, then hopefully HR will be able to be more credible activists than perhaps it's ever been before, since really the profession kind of started. So I think hopefully,
but it's credible to whom? Because if you look at Ulrich, when he talks about credible activists, it's all about being credible for management, and that's only one part. It's not only credibility to management; it's credibility to the people in the organization. It's credibility to your community, and that's where it goes wrong. That if it's only credibility for management. And you're elevating, but the question is, what does the elevating mean? What do you mean by elevating? Is that elevated to closer to management?
I think Perry obviously talked about it. I think in terms of our brand and status as a profession, I think it's in a place where it hopefully will have more weight, so we could do these things. I mean, I don't know, Perry, but if that's...
Well, I suppose to Tom's point, it isn't just elevated so that you become one of those leaders that, as George says, perhaps ends up not bothering so much. It's having influence at that level, right? So I work with clients where the HR director is literally battering against the board to go in a certain direction because they think it's right. They've even got evidence, and the board are really stubborn and stoic and don't budge and so on. So, some things we can't even arm wrestle our way into them. I think the elevation is also in what people appreciated from their HR support at all levels, right? So if you worked in a warehouse or if you were working in delivery services and HR said, look, we need to help you stay safe, and here's how isolation works, and here's how furlough works. I think people went, oh, I'm glad I've got HR like this then, because I feel looked after, I feel protected, and I understand now my, interventions that can help me. So I think it's elevated in terms of impact, not just elevated in terms of strategic stratosphere, because I agree with Tom. That's a dangerous place to be spending too much time, to my point of in the canteen, because you lose touch then with what people in the organization need, and you're just the typical corporate poodle type thing then. Do you know what I mean? So we don't need to do that. I think we can actually create a little bit of distance and become a bit more like ask the awkward questions, do you know what I mean, and put some pressure on the top team, because we're representing the voice of what's right for people and what's right for the business ultimately, and communities. As Tom said, if an organization is not doing enough for social mobility, you want to be the one who's holding up that sort of particular frame of reference and going, look, we're not representative of our demographic. This is not how we need to be, and I'm not colluding with this, so I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable until we do something that addresses that imbalance. So I think it's that elevation.
And I think also the kind of the activism piece also comes from the people. So, there are far more people who are now at work who are much more focused on fairness and equity. I mean, that's around diversity and inclusion, but it's also about, understanding, being much more politically aware, socially aware, and driving for actually, I want to work in an organization that cares about what I care about. And that really matters to me. And I think that when we see this kind of anti-HR and these HR people are, wanting everyone to work from home, and that's ridiculous, and everyone should be in an office, and, all this commentary, it's because they're not listening to what people actually want, when, their people want something different to what management says they should have. And it's, I think, the role of HR to make sure that voice is heard really clearly.
We've had a couple of questions come in from Lucy Mills. So do you think HR will still be trusted by the people if they are elevated as discussed? And also she asks, how can we ensure that we remain trusted? So I suppose if you're challenging, I suppose the point is, how do you still gain that trust if they feel you're sort of battling? Anybody would like to answer Lucy's questions? I can leave them on screen if it's helpful.
I suppose one example I think about, sorry, George, is the engagement survey, right? The classic case of I told you stuff and nothing happened, right? So that's where there's instantly a trust breach, because, at the corporate top, they kind of go, oh, that's not a problem. Let's not worry about that. And I've been in with management teams who have said stuff like, high attrition doesn't bother us. I'm like, what? You're not bothered about the fact that you've got like a conveyor belt of people who keep coming in and chewing them up and spitting them out? So I think there are symbolic things we could do that show we are representing the right outcome. And that might be for management to do a certain thing about pivoting the business, or people and the conditions of work and choice and all that kind of stuff. So I think we don't need to get involved in what territory are we in, because I think we're on the territory of what's right for this business and the people that are here. And I think as long as we keep reiterating that, I think people will go, so they're not biased one way or the other. That, I think, is probably our fairest position to be in.
Yeah. And surely it's about pulling in the same direction. Surely we should all be working towards the same goal. And as soon as it's a conflict, then it's whatever, whether that's managers or the person or whatever it is, there's an imbalance. And the point is, you work for an organization, and that should be a source of fulfillment for you. And it may not be the most exciting job and you love and wake up in the morning and can't wait to get to work, but it should be an organization or a place where you feel that you're respected and you're valued and the people listen to you. And that is what creates that loyalty, and that actually I want to do the right thing for this organization rather than this constant management and everyone else, and management.
It also helps to be a little bit transparent in a way.
Yeah.
We're saying everything should be aligned, but I think that is not super helpful, because, well, the interest and the goals of individuals are not necessarily aligned with the organization.
Yeah.
We should realize it. But if you're transparent about it, but sometimes managers and HR are not transparent. They say, "Oh, Perry, I'm here to help you," and people immediately sense that that's not true. My main focus is not to help Perry. My main focus is to get the organization going and reach our goals. And of course, as long as Perry fits in that, it's okay. But as soon as Perry does not fit in that, I say goodbye, and people know that.
Yeah.
So if we are more transparent, that's why I plead for people's success as a separate entity, because saying, "Oh, I'm here to help you," and at the same time, I'm constantly pursuing organizational goals, that's not a good basis for trust.
Yeah.
We had a comment here from Ronique Samuel. There's a perception amongst some employees that HR gravitated towards acting in the best interest of managers instead of employees, which is kind of very similar to the point you were making from that perspective. I wanted to move on from this sort of trust sort of topic that we were talking about, and I want to move to Perry. When we talked before, you talked about paradoxes in HR, and I have to be honest, you didn't elaborate much more, so I have no idea what you were going to talk. I have no idea where this is going to go.
Yeah.
No idea. So we're all ears. What do you mean by paradoxes in HR?
Right. So we've just had one, actually. You know, is it either or? Is it management or employees? Right? That's a paradox, because it's not that. It's management and employees in the way Tom described. It's like, what's the best outcome that drives this business forward? So we have sustainable, fulfilling employment, and we have managers who are aware of how they get the best out of people and look after them. Do you know what I mean? It's that. So when I talk about paradoxes, when I say paradox, sometimes people think polarity, and they think either or. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's and, because it's how can we be stable but also agile? Do you know what I mean? How can we be target driven but compassionate? You know, these are things that can coexist, right? So I think what we've seen in the world of business is you've often got this thing where people say, we work hard and play hard. What they mean is you work hard. That's it, end of, right? So we've had these really ridiculous rhetorical devices that don't mean anything. And I think people are forced into choices sometimes they don't have to make, because a paradox will tell you can be artistic and scientific. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So instead of us trying to create the polarity of choice, let's see what we can do to manage both dynamics of that, because that's what organizations need. They're complex, adaptive environments, and people even change. So I'll give you an example for me just to prove this point. Paradoxically, I reported as the most engaged employee in the company that I ended up doing some rubbish things and had to resign from in 2012. Now, you tell me that is the norm, that you'd see this highly engaged individual, blah, 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 and then I ended up screwing some stuff up. It's almost like that's an example where we can't just trust the data. We've got to also look behind the scenes. It didn't matter that I was overworked partly by my own denomination and so on. Do you know what I mean? Everybody said, yeah, but he's the most engaged person in the world. Paradoxically, they should have said, but that's got some danger signs, because if he's over engaged, he might be overstretched, and therefore that's where problems come. So this is what I mean by paradoxes. It's the and bit. How can we create something that's pliable but also really firm? Do you know what I mean? And I think businesses are so complex now. We're grappling with a paradox right now, which is the hybrid working thing. That is a paradox, because it's like, where does the choice sit? Where's the best dynamic for the organization? And instead of going, should we come in for some days and out for some days? I think the paradoxical sort of way of looking at that is, how can we be flexible and have, you know, reliable administrative and non-bureaucratic systems that help us know when to be where about what. So yeah, that's what I mean by paradox. I hope that's helped unpack it a bit. Probably not.
No, it absolutely has. I think obviously it's a really complex. This is where, you know, the expertise of people like yourself and some of the, you know, the best HR practitioners and consultants and things out there can help people navigate that.
I learned a lot from I don't know whether you know von Strompenaars. I'm sure
I do.
Yeah, and he talks always about dilemma reconciliation, and that it's a grid, where you have two axes. It's two axes. It's for example technology and human centered.
Yeah.
So it's not technology versus no, it's how can you use technology to become more human centered. And
exactly
that's
that.
He calls that the 9-9.
I love Fonz's work.
9.
Yeah.
And dilemma reconciliation, I like that a lot. And thank you for bringing it up, Barry, because that's and that has to do also with the complexity. Let's not simplify things too much.
Yeah.
But let's try to go to that upper corner. Say, how can we do
that?
It's very interesting thoughts.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think there's probably a whole show on that, to be honest with you, because it's true. It's you're right in a lot of what you're saying, and I think it is a really complex thing to navigate. And I think I talked to a lot of OD people and things like that, and they're trying to sort of figure out how do we make this work, and how do we keep that sort of stability, but also agility and things. So and then the hybrid working thing. I mean, we did a show. I think it was back might have been May last year, specifically on hybrid working. So if anybody's interested and wants to find out a little bit more about a discussion about that, seems like a long time ago now, but I'm sure some of the stuff in there will still be very, very relevant. And I think we're still grappling with a lot of the things that were talked about back then. We're still grappling with it now in March 2022. So
But that's right, though, isn't it? Isn't that right? This is you have to keep evolving. This is the thing. I think that there's a lot of businesses that are trying to just revert and it worked fine before, and let's go back to that. And I think it's about we have to keep talking about it, and we'll try things out, and some things will work and some things won't, and you have to approach it like that rather than now we need to fix it, and then it's fixed, and then we move on to the next thing.
Yeah, things move on. And things can be unexpected, as we've all, I think, experienced in the last sort of couple of weeks. And also, a few weeks ago when we tried to do the show and we had a power cut. So it brings me a little bit, actually, quite nicely into the 6th trend from your report, Tom. I don't know can you remember which one the 6th is?
No.
Okay. I'll tell you which one it is. It was forgiving technologies.
Yeah.
And obviously, when we're talking about evolving and what George was just saying there, you talked about. So he said, in terms of, I'll let you tell us what he said. But basically, is HR using technology enough, and are we lagging behind other disciplines that are using it more for their benefit than we are as a profession?
It's you look at the term forgiving technology I got from the fashion industry, and so there is fashion that is kind of forgiving to, for example, if you become fatter, the fabric adapts. So you don't have to buy new clothes all the time, but the fabric you can look it up, and you can also fashion or clothes that grow with the children. So you can.
I've seen those.
So that's adapted. So it's forgiving technology. Forgiving is you're a little bit fatter, but we don't see it. Not me. That's it. So technology. If
you're looking in great shape, Tom. I just thought I should say.
I ran 12 marathons or 16.
I think you said. I can't remember how many you said. 16. You said.
but technology in the HR domain is still very much focused often on efficiency. Let's make sure that we optimize the process, that we can put everything in a workflow. And most of those technology forces us in common workflows. Where technology is fantastic, allows us to be a lot more adaptive, to, for example, adapt to the capabilities of Tom, Perry, George, Leo. We are different. Why should we all use the same workflow? One of us is maybe more advanced, another is a little bit clumsy and older. So let's take that into account when we work as technology with those people, instead of saying, but this is the technology and you have to use it. Well, I don't see a lot of that forgiving technology that is used in a personalized way to make the life of people in work situations a lot better. And we force them in workflows that generally do not work for anybody. The best example always is performance management. We know that it doesn't work very well anywhere, but often because we force people to say this is how we do it, and we've spent consultants and design on our process. You better do it. It's a global process. Good luck. Technology offers a lot of opportunity, and we maybe better use it to make the life in organizations a lot better. So that's the forgiving technology part, and it will come. It's undoubtedly, yeah. So that's a real trend, because we see more. We see more in the consumer area. Cars, for example, that's a good example where cars adapt to the people who are driving the cars, even if they're clumsy and not so good.
If one of the things, I don't know if any of you know this, I'm just intrigued because I'm aware of HR chatbots and how these bots are becoming even more human-like and things like that. I don't know if anybody, I don't know from a research perspective, George, whether the CIPD are aware of this or how much is going on, but it's like the front line is a chatbot. I don't know whether you consider that to be well, I don't know if forgiving technology is quite the right term, but is this something you guys have come across, heard about? Is it, I don't know how widely used it is. I think it's quite a rare thing.
Well,
Would you be in favour of something like that?
Well, but they are generally not adaptive. So the chatbot does his or her thing.
Yeah.
And most chatbots are not very artificial intelligent powered. They have a list of 20 questions, and if you ask,
they look up tables.
Yeah. So they don't think, oh, here is Tom.
No.
Hey, how can we? How does he like to be?
Yeah.
How advanced? That's I have not seen it, but it's not so easy.
Yeah, I think in some organisations it might be an efficient way of delivering some basic services. I think that it's not that it should never be used or it's not appropriate in any circumstances, but I think it is another move away from that personalized. The point is we employ people and everyone's different and everyone needs different things, and the more you try and standardize the offering or the way you treat your people, the more inhuman it becomes, and the less you are able to really motivate people to do their best work, because it's not about me, it's about I'm one of many. You don't care about me. We're all one person. We all have our own perspective on the world, and the more you try and create this world where everyone is vanilla and the same.
But then it's back to the dilemma reconciliation. It's how can you do both?
Yeah.
So, use the chatbots in a humanized way. Because there are big advantages. For example, they are available 24/7. If it's 3 o'clock at night, you have a question, you can go there.
Yeah.
And some people are quite happy with that. And you don't want other people to be sitting there waiting for a call. So
it answers the question completely. But if it's then that's replacing a personalized service, then exactly. So it's about
so
it's completely
I know one major bank who implemented a chatbot, and it was very successful. It was a lookup table, Tom. It wasn't sophisticated.
Yeah.
Now this talks to George's point and Tom's point actually, because it did take about 80% of queries away that people used to have to answer, really standard stuff, right? And people grew to love the chatbot because it's like, I just get that answer that I want like that when I want it. But when they wanted to talk to an operator, rather than go through a painful process of knowing the chatbot will eventually bounce them to a human being, all they did was they put the query in Greek, and it instantly put them to a human being because it couldn't understand it. So people worked out how to hack the chatbot. I thought that was terrific. I can remember an advert from ServiceNow who, when they were promoting their platform, they said, look, if I'm a telegraph pole and I want to put my overtime claim in, I can use ServiceNow, voice activated, whatever, and it will put it. And I'm thinking, cool, that's good. But I think to both your points, I think it absolutely is. There are some things that works brilliantly for, and it won't be forgiving technology if it hasn't got machine learning and adaptability at the back end of it, because it will just be standard lookup stuff. But I think what people sometimes want is a quick answer, but sometimes a quick chat with a human being. So I think it's got to be in there.
But customization I know from KLM, our airline, they ask you, hey, how would you like to communicate with us? WhatsApp? Would you like email, or do you like to speak to a person? They just ask what you want. And there are quite some people say, oh, okay, I'll send an email. Not everybody says, I want to speak to an operator. But that's a simple thing. Then you don't have to cheat. If you just do you want to speak to a bot or a real person?
Yeah.
Well, some people say, okay,
Totally
real
that.
person, and then you should be there.
I can remember when SharePoint first came out, the big selling point was you could build your own intranet. I don't think I've seen many people do that, though, to be honest. I think that was a false dawn, because most intranets are where corporate information goes to die.
Yeah.
People spend hours making sure they've got all the information on them. Hours.
I think it's really interesting in terms of the technology side, but I think if I can talk, I really want to talk about this because I'm very conscious of time and talking about HR structure, because I mean, I've noticed when I've been working with clients a lot more recently, I spend a lot of time working with HR leaders, and we talk about their structure, and they might say, oh, you know, so-and-so's left, and we're thinking about, you know, sometimes smaller organizations, what do I replace them with? These are challenges, these are the things we need to achieve. What kind of person, what do I need to pay Leon, and all these sorts of conversations, which I enjoy. But one of the things that I've had recently is this real kind of move away, and it's also in Tom's sort of, I think one of your mega trends, I think you refer to as, Tom, about the structure moving away and having these sort of different sort of strands in terms of what we're looking at. And I suppose in my eyes, how do you see the dominant structure of HR in 2022? Do you see a trend moving much further away, or what do you, from kind of what we've had traditionally, or do you think it's just it's just continuation of what's been happening before? Are things different in 2022 in terms of HR structure? Anyone?
Well, I just repeat what I've already. I see the dominant trend is twofold. One is the split of HR, operations, strategy, people success. Big organizations are already implementing that, and so smaller organizations, that's probably less of an issue at the moment. But I think that trend will continue. Operations, strategy separate, yes. People success still has to come. So I think that's a clear trend. The second structural trend I would see, but that's slower, is the widening of the scope. And I describe that's not only the people on the payroll, but looking at the wider workforce. And then even, as I mentioned, not only the workforce, but also, of course, clients, suppliers. So that widening of the scope is also going on, but at a slower pace, in my view.
Perry, George, any?
I'd buy that.
Other comment?
Yeah, I'd buy that. I've got a trend of disaggregation, because I think what we are already starting to see is people coming together from different divisions along the supply or value chain. And it's almost like you've got a home base, which is HR, but you spend a lot of time on projects, particularly because I think a lot of work now is projects. There's a start, middle, and an end to it. There is ongoing stuff, of course, but even that's got iterations going on within it, where people are going, let's adapt that. So I think that's what I'm seeing. And in fact, I'm working with clients now where HR doesn't spend any time with HR, really, not much at all. It's with the business. It's working on tactical and strategic solutions in the way that Tom's describing. So I can see stuff like people intelligence being marketing, R&D, HR, all in the same space, because they're trying to wrestle with all the right kind of trended data, and then their outputs are different because their audience are different. But I think they're working on how can we create a massive people intelligence for this organization that's about our people, the people out there, the supply chain, the contingent workforce, etc., etc. So I don't see anything wrong in that at all. Home base and fluidity in work.
You said home base, and I kept thinking about DIY, which
not the DIY store or baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's another thing that we get a bit obsessed about. What should we look like? What should we call ourselves? What does this exist? Does that? I think it's about understanding what the business needs, and I think that's a really important point, Perry. That I do think, and I look at my own kind of team, I think we are quite traditional, and actually are we, for this, going back to where we started, the kind of in terms of the brand, and not that we should be rebranding, I don't mean it like that, in terms of how we are perceived, this is about making sure that we are working in a way that is really developing the business. So if that means that it is these disparate teams that are not all joined in this kind of, we all sit in the same office and we all meet and we all discuss what we're all going to do in this internal focus cycle, This is about making sure that we have those great connections across the business, and we are constantly responding. And I think this is back to the kind of what skills we're looking for in people. It's not about, you know, where you studied or what you studied at uni. This is about, do you have the mindset to keep evolving and adapting? Because that's the need. And it's the same for HR teams. It's like, are you prepared for, rather than what you were doing 5 years ago, how can you adjust what you're thinking and who you're working with and what you're talking about, rather than, oh, well, I just manage absence, or I, you know, have to deal with, you know, the new performance management structure or whatever it is. It's about actually, what does the business that I am working in need, and how is it going to respond, and how can I force that change?
Yeah, it's interesting from my perspective on the recruitment side. So I think it was about 4 years ago, I was working with Deloitte in Switzerland, and they went to a squads version of HR, and really kind of came away from kind of like a centralized with a business partner sort of model. I was talking with a VP of HR for EMEA just last week, and he's just looked at his, you know, from what you were saying, George, he looked at what they were doing in terms of HR and how they were structured. You know, they had a head of HR and, you know, HR advisors and all that on a manufacturing plant. And there was sort of, you know, it's a big manufacturing plant, and just thinking, why do we do it like that? And so it's literally, you know, looking in terms of, how do I change the structure? How do I make this better? And I think the one thing I find from a recruitment perspective is that when you get those positions, it's really good for me, because I get to have those conversations, really understand where people's passions are. So you've got business partners all over the place, but quite a lot of them have got very different passions, skill sets, interests, you know, particular parts. They're all classed as business partners. On paper, they're all a business partner, but you'll find that each one of them wants to do different things and is passionate about different things. So I'm sort of hopeful that for HR and for the HR practitioner in their careers, that there'll be more kind of interesting, maybe sexier, arguably, opportunities for people to develop their career in a way that maybe they might not have had, you know, before, where they're a business partner and a center of excellence and things like that. So I do think that that model is still adds a huge amount of value to certain organizations, particularly larger multinational businesses. But I'm really liking the fact that when I'm talking to HR leaders now, they're really looking at it individually and saying what's right for us, and not just sort of, you know, bringing out the old copybook of what's been used in terms of structures before. So I'm really, thank you for giving us your insights on that, because obviously it's something that HR structure is something I hear about a lot in my work. So yeah, it was really good to hear that. One of the things, just with regards to some of the trends that we talked a little bit about skill sets. I'm thinking obviously always from a talent perspective and the kind of skill sets we need. And I think, Perry, we touched on this back in, I think, June, whenever it was, when we talked about the future of HR. But I'm particularly intrigued from you guys in terms of, if you see the skill set of HR needing to change. Again, if we refer back to your rebrand and how we're perceived, is it a skills things that need to change for us, or is it just, you know, how we're kind of, you know, perceived and how we operate that need to change? I don't know if, in terms of your thoughts on that, George, Tom.
I mean, I think that definitely there are skills that, you know, HR professionals need to skill up in, and that's, you know, a lot to do with data and analytics. And even if you're in quite a small organisation, that having that capability is really important. I think that resilience is something that is really needed, you know, and I think that will serve people well if you can figure out how to kind of face into those conversations and not be completely battered every time, you know, you get pushed back, which is going to be, you know, regularly. I think that's what will help professionals really kind of show their mettle in terms of being able to kind of hold the line and not feel defeated when they, you know, they don't get their message across the first time. I think there are the basics, but I think that there's sort of the human skills. I think that, you know, this is again kind of around the terminology piece. Like, don't talk about soft skills and, you know, job skills. This is about human skills. It's about engaging and building relationships and understanding the needs of people. And I think that those are all really important. And I think that flexible mindset will join all that together to really think about, you know, all we've talked about, which is actually, how am I adapting as a professional for the business, for my next career step? How does that look? I think that when when you look at kind of job ads, particularly for HR people, they're all very similar. So it's great that, a lot of leaders are seeing there's going to be, a shift, and let's look at capabilities and let's look at broadening out expectations. But the reality is a lot of jobs in HR are quite traditional. And I think that, that having that willingness to think about it differently in a more creative way, that's not feeding through to the broader profession yet, but hopefully that will come.
I'm guessing that the CIPD are looking to help upskill the profession, and particularly, I know it's more than the UK now, but really looking at those sorts of things as well. Okay.
I think what helps, the move away from jobs, not so much maybe in HR, but generally to skills, helps enormously, because then we don't have to put everything in one person saying, every person should have this and this and this. No, let's look. There are people who are very good in methodology, statistics, analytics. Well, that might be enough. Let's use that, and those people might not have those other skills. But if we look at skills, then we can build teams with people who bring their top skills to the table instead of asking everything in one person. I think that's a big advantage going forward, also in recruitment.
I'm with Tom.
Harry, did you want to?
Yeah, totally with Tom on that. I think like the whole jobs thing, I can remember Nilofer Merchant a few years ago when she was talking about the social era. She said it's about work, not jobs. And I absolutely think that's what it is. And Tom's totally right. Because when you think about strategic workforce planning, which is no good anywhere really, it needs massive improvement. It's about capabilities and skills. And so you then create an organizational capability out of that. So you don't have an organizational job. So all these intricate job descriptions we've been farting around with for so long, just bin them and just go with what Tom says, capabilities and skills, and let's recruit to those, because I think that also gives us versatility and diversification when we need it. And it also talks to another one of Tom's trends, which is diversity in recruitment. I think it'll help with that. It will break a load of biases, saying, does that person fit that job? No. What capabilities have they got? What difference do they bring? Absolutely that. Totally that.
Excellent. So there's one final thing that I really want to get your guys' view on. So Gartner published a trends report and a survey that they did, and it's all to do with the rising turnover, increasing competition for talent. I'm just looking at my notes here. And I'm certainly seeing this with my clients, and the employment market at the moment is incredibly challenging for a lot of people. Obviously, I'm doing my best to help my clients to sort of navigate that and get the right skills and capabilities into the business that they need. But I just wanted your, I suppose, piece of advice to a HR professional about how they would navigate through the sort of challenge that's out there at the moment.
Well, one of the solutions we just described, look more at skills, capabilities instead of the jobs. And I think I see it as a very positive development, because if the pressure is building up, there will be more solutions. There are many people still unemployed, for example, in my country, older people, refugees. So there's an enormous amount of people with good skills. In the Netherlands, the labor participation of many people is quite low. So there's a lot of room. There's a lot of capacity, hidden capacity we can use. And I think when the pressure is building up, we will find ways to use that capacity.
Do you think this is a short-term trend? Because that's kind of, in terms of the Gartner report, was that they saw that because we've all come out of lockdowns and all these kind of things, that this is a short-term hit. And I suppose the one thing I'm unsure about is if that's really actually the case, or whether a lot of talent or people are more empowered in terms of the decisions that they make, and perhaps are being a little bit bolder in terms of what they might do, and not feeling like they need to be loyal to a particular business for such a long period of time. Do you see this as a short-term thing, or do you think that the market has changed out of the last sort of couple of years and what we've been through with the pandemic?
I think it's long-term. It's the emancipation of the workforce, and that's a long-term trend. So the autonomy of people, so that will continue and continue. I called
I
that,
think so.
and this year I said the end of the employee, and that's exactly that trend, which will continue, I think.
I think it surprised me how many people were looking and willing to move in the middle of a pandemic, when you think surely you just hunker down and play it safe. But they did the total opposite, and I think that's why it caught the market a bit by surprise. And there are some differences between sort of white collar, blue collar, and so on and so forth, aren't there? Right. And as Tom said, I think what we're now starting to see is a diversification of this workforce, so that we've got contingent in a whole different way. Gig working, I think, has been sweated to a point where that's dirty now. But I think this choice-based allegiance of who do I want to go to, I think talks to one of George's other trends, which is about purposeful businesses being a real lure for people, because they're like, this means something to me. They're a good corporate citizen. They stand in the right space for climate. They look after diversity and inclusion issues. They're fair. I want to go there. I think that's lovely. Like Tom says, I think it's a good thing for the market.
Yeah.
I've read recently Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game. And I think those organisations, particularly like that, are the ones that will champion. I'm very fortunate that most of the clients I work with have got really high ethics, and I'm very proud to represent them and be that kind of face for them. And they're doing great things. But I definitely think that it's incredibly important, because if businesses aren't, then they're going to find it very, very difficult. They've got to think about, how do we attract, and part of that is by thinking long term about what is it we stand for, and a lot of the things we've talked about throughout this show. So I'm just going to make a quick nod to the next show, which will be on the 13th of April. It's going to be a sort of HR career tips. So I've got a nice panel lined up there with different sort of backgrounds and skills that I think will be really interesting for people if you're an aspirational HR professional and want to get to real HR leadership positions and make a real difference to those organizations that you're involved with. Then this will be a great show for you guys to be involved with. So to follow that, follow me on LinkedIn. That'd be a good way to make sure that you don't miss out, or subscribe obviously on the YouTube channel or any of the podcast platforms that we're also on. And we'll hope to see you on the 13th of April. We've obviously got to do our 2 lies, 1 truth reveals. So let's go with that, shall we? So I think the order we did it, so if I remember rightly, Tom ran 16 marathons, right? So do you want to tell us your 3 facts, Tom? And we'll try and work out which is the truth.
Yeah, I ran 16 marathons. I don't drink alcohol, and I have a major in archaeology.
Okay. George, what are your thoughts? Which one do you think is the truth?
I think he doesn't drink.
Okay. Teetotaler? Perry?
I think he's got a major in archaeology.
Yeah, see, I thought that as well, but just to make it interesting, I'm going to go with we've seen him stand up, right? I think he could well have done
he's pretty live, isn't he?
He's looking in good shape. So I'm going to go the 16 marathons.
Yeah, and
on,
George
Tom.
is right. I don't drink alcohol. Yeah.
Okay.
I ran a couple of marathons, but not 16. So
that's a lot. That is a lot.
That's why he looks so good.
Have you always not drunk alcohol, or is it like there was a point?
But the last 5-6 years, I stopped at the
okay.
Because of the running, in fact. Yeah.
Oh, because he had the 4 marathons. Or whatever it was. Excellent. Okay, and then I can't remember who was next. I think it was you, Perry, wasn't it? Yeah. So go on. What were yours?
So I own the domain name 21st Century Fox, but 20th Century Fox wouldn't buy it. Transformational HR is translated in Mandarin, Chinese, Romanian, and Norwegian. And I'm featured on a viral TikTok with over 1 million views, with people tickling my beard.
Which Tom's seen, he said.
I think number 2 is true.
You think number 2 is true?
Yeah.
I think so too. Sorry, do I have to choose a different one? I think
no, you can go with 2. I really want the TikTok one, but I know it's not true. Okay. Yeah, it's not going to be that, but I'm just going to go for it, just because if it's true, then I'll be very happy.
I didn't own the domain name, but apparently somebody did, and that's why 20th Century Fox has never become 21st Century Fox on the web. So that's not me. Transformational HR is translated in Mandarin, Chinese, and Romanian, but not Norwegian. So the truth is, I'm featured on a viral TikTok video, over 1 million views. Somebody tickling my beard.
Okay, there will be in the show notes. In the show notes, the link.
Wow.
In the show notes, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
You have to find it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
all this
Who is
great.
tickling your beard then?
They were tickling my beard, yeah, going,
Oh, your
wiggle,
own
wiggle,
beard.
wiggle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
my
you're
own beard.
more
They came up to me.
You must be more famous for that than you are for all the great
Probably.
work that you've done in HR.
Probably,
How many
yeah.
books have you sold, Perry? Honestly.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, not enough. Wow. Okay, so I was right. I was not expecting that to be the answer.
Well done.
Okay, George. Finally, what are your three facts?
I was once a ball girl at Wimbledon. I once broke my ankle doing a parachute jump. I once abseiled down my office building.
I think number 1 is true. The Wimbledon.
Wimbledon one.
thing. Yeah.
I'm going
Harry?
to go for the parachute ankle incident.
Ah, it's interesting because I was going to say the abseil. I could
there we go.
definitely. I can imagine that's something like company
Somebody's right.
thing wide. Yeah, so we're all going different ones, George. So
Mm.
let us know who's the winner.
I have abseiled down my office building. I have also done a parachute jump, but I didn't break my ankle.
Aha.
Ah.
I was never a ball girl at Wimbledon. I may sound like I could have been, but I never.
So I got 2 out of 3, which literally is
Yeah,
the
good.
best I've ever done. I normally get them all wrong. If you watch any of the previous ones, I've normally got them all wrong. So yeah, I must be on it today. But no, thank you very much, obviously, for doing that. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you. Yeah.
the 3 of you, for being involved in the discussion and the show. It's been an absolute pleasure, and really good just to discuss HR trends for this year. And who knows, we might get you back all in again at some other show or something like that. But no, it's been
2
a
more
real
lies?
pleasure.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure about that, but we'll definitely will get you. I'm sure at some point in the future. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope it's been really interesting, informative, and giving you some food for thought. And yeah, please do join us on the 13th of April. For the next show, and check out everything on the YouTube page as well. We've got highlights for things. We've got the HR Book Club, which obviously we mentioned with Perry's been on there. So lots of really interesting sort of content and stuff. I hope interesting content for the HR professional on there. Of course, if you're recruiting in HR and would like my support and help, then I would be more than happy to assist and support. And I can certainly give references and things, can't I, George, about some of the work that I do. So yeah, if anybody would like any support on that basis, then obviously please do let me know. But otherwise, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.